what we would expect to be a 3-0 for Gale Force Esports. They're at the very top of the standings, and then we've got Even and Death. But last time they faced off, Even and Death were able to take one game. It was when Gale Force was experimenting with Tyrande a bit. Think maybe they could do the same here?
It's hard because Gale Force is willing to, kind of play with their food. They have 2 times, I believe, maybe even 3, where they have gotten 2 up on a team. They feel confident, and they're like, what about this hero, right? And get a little bit wild with it. Granted, Tyrande since then has become a bit more popular and used around the world. But yeah, so I'm torn. Like, I actually feel like I project this to be a 3-1 based on that element, and I feel like Even and Death slowly getting better because Gale Force is very powerful, but I feel like the one thing they're working on is always being clean and always being consistent, and I feel like Even and Death may be strong enough now to actually get that one upset, that one wild team fight that they need. It's just going to be important that they avoid falling behind in the early game, I feel like, for Even and Death here.
Yeah, for Gale Force Esports, it's an important victory. Everyone is, because people are clawing at their spot in the standings right now. Only a single victory ahead of anyone, and I do believe with Roll20's win, they'll now be tied at 6 victories each. There they are. But, again, Roll20 have played more series than Gale Force Esports. So Gale Force now has some wiggle room. This is their first and only series of the weekend, but next weekend they go up against Tempo Storm.
And as we have talked about, out of all the other parts and phases throughout HGC, it's who you play at the beginning and how you win against those specific teams. Even though Roll20 is down 2 losses, they have also taken out extremely formidable opponents, which then makes it more probable that they, in fact, would be able to tie out or at least close in the gap there with them and Gale Force Esports.
Well, let's hear from Battery and Michael Udall what they think about this upcoming series.
Coming back from part 1, we've definitely learned a lot from our time in the HGC. We had a lot of plans for analyzing that first part, and we've taken our licks and we've got the data, and we've established what the mistakes are. We're growing, and we're looking forward to having a much stronger part 2. Our set coming up against Juffy, we're definitely looking forward to kind of catch them off guard with some new strategies that we've been preparing, and they probably don't expect that much from us, and we're looking forward to using that to take a couple games or maybe even a set off of them.
Coming out of the Western Clash, I mean, team atmosphere has been pretty good. We all individually kind of chose things that we want to focus on. And I see that in scrims, right? Where like everyone's kind of focusing on little things like of their own gameplay to improve. And I really like that because I feel like it's like really lifting everyone up. Even in Death, really at the beginning of last season, I feel like they were a lot worse than they are now. So I mean, I still think we'll be able to beat them pretty handily. That being said, we're not underestimating any team. Like, we're not taking any game for granted. They love their stitches. So that's something we're definitely looking out for. We've been having Akka face, in customs, just practicing, juke hook so he doesn't feed. I do feel like our team has like a lot of drive, and we're really trying to be the best that we can be.
Both of these teams talking about the ways that they have been improving over the break for Gale Force Esports since the Western Clash a couple of weekends ago. And Dredd, as you mentioned yesterday, Even in Death is a team that always is improving. They work really hard in trying to be able to get better and better. So I'm really excited, given what we saw from Lag Force yesterday and how much they improved over the break, what we can see from Even in Death now in this series versus Gale Force.
Even in Death is a team that we often look over, but I feel like, this is going to be a bold statement, and I know it's going to be, and a lot of people are going to be like, how can you ever feel that way? But like, they are, the rate at which they are constantly getting better, slowly but surely, is debatably one of the most optimistic futures for a team I feel like I've seen out of anybody. Because if you look at Team Freedom, for instance, equally as youthful, but it had high amounts of growth and development at major points. But though they all have a low, they all have a severe drop-off afterwards. That consistency to keep climbing upwards, if this roster keeps going at this rate, they're going to be a problem for North American teams. They may not be there yet. They're kind of just maybe a small speed bump, but they are really, truly going to be a problem because they have, again, in my opinion, the healthiest signs of growth.
Yeah, for a team that was thrown into the fire the way they were after the Crucible taking over B-Step's spot, they have worked so hard to get to the place they are and the respect of all of the teams. But even still, they are going up against Gale Force Esports. And Gale Force, along with being the top in standings currently, have a lot of fans, a lot of growth behind them, a lot of love. We can actually take a look at the top users, the top 5 who have been cheering for Gale Force Esports in the Twitch chat. We've got RobDog222 at the top with 75,000. Not quite Tempo Storm status though, so Gale Force users, or Gale Force lovers, fans, keep cheering him on.
Keep cheering him on. Do we go with 5K Prack at the bottom there, or is that Vivek Prack?
I think it's Vivek.
You know, this is part of the struggle that I have here. I'm, you know, reading each one of these, like, Gladman, we've seen there, we know that. Joe's
Man,
Space.
you are a beast, and we love you. Well, let's go over to Even in Death now and see who all has been cheering for Even in Death, our newest team to HGC in North America.
I love that
No
second
surprise,
name.
Gladman's there.
No surprise. And also with Unsalted Pirate. That's like you went, you know, you're like 12 years old, you went in and you decided to create your name and you went to a random generator, it gives you the noun and the adjective immediately after. You walked away with Unsalted Pirate.
Well, it's really important, Dread, that you have your pirates unsalted, because if a salty pirate is there, it causes all sorts of trouble for the rest of your pirates.
Yeah, some scurvy and what else goes on there. Honestly, I don't really know how you have to have.
Usually, you think about it, and the type of food that pirates eat, it's probably very salted. They're out at sea for a long periods of time.
Probably.
You need that kind of preservatives there for the food to make sure. So this is a rare to have an unsalted pirate here.
And we aren't even considering the morale boost that it would be. But the toxicity level with that low levels of salt and sodium across the board,
so true.
the teamwork that they must have when heaving and hoeing, rowing around. My goodness, we've got to be working on this.
We've got to consider this for Even in Death. This throws all new sorts of issues into the equation. Let's get this series underway. Game number 1 takes place on none other than Brax's Holdout.
Braxis Holdout for Gale Force Esports. This is their map at this point. Not only did they show that they pretty much beat almost everyone in North America on Braxis Holdout, they can even take other teams from even Europe onto this map, as they displayed at the Western Clash, that their performance, their play style, their adjustments, and how to manipulate is just almost unrivaled. So, Even in Death, Tall Tale. If it wasn't already, this is kind of the map. This game will be David and Goliath level if somehow Even in Death gets a win.
It is still at least a semi-favorite of Even in Death 2, so that is maybe even why we don't see Braxis Holdout banned versus Gale Force here, is because Even in Death are fairly confident on Braxis Holdout, and because they knew that it was very likely that Gale Force chose this battleground. I expect that one of those strategies that Battery mentioned in his interview probably is going to pop up here in game number 1.
See if they get a bit wild with it. Either way, kicking off the bans, we got Dahaka taken away. Strong individual solo laner, but we also have to consider the fact Gale Force doesn't really play heavy solo laners. They oftentimes are running like a 1-3-1 or a 2-1-2, depending on the composition they have developed, really. It's a kind of situational and circumstantial. So by no means do I feel like the Dahaka ban is going to be overly resourceful. Even in Death sticking to what they showed, high priority onto the Ariel.
It's at least a little bit of the control of the globals, and against Global Force Esports, it is nice to have control of those globals. That's how they play so many of their games. And this is a battleground where they have employed the usage of Zagara to make sure that they have the semi-globals of all of the different cloaked heroes like Valera and Zeratul. But an Ariel pick, Even in Death still willing to pick this hero, even though, like we talked about, there's the wonder if, man, is this song new? I love it. It's distracting.
It's gotta be
awesome.
new. It is new.
But they're still willing to play Ariel, even though we know and we wondered which teams would be willing to use her, given that she's going to be banned next, or not banned next week, but nerfed next week.
Yeah, and so it's naturally, I want to say I really like this from them. It's just that is kind of died out in the North American scene. You know, I question if the remainder of this draft is going to feel a bit dated or not. Their double support is going to be confirmed, and a high Illidan priority. So this is really, really interesting. The team who is second lowest standing out of all of North America is drafting the most international meta-esque from Western and Eastern Clash than every other team so far.
But we said that same thing after the midseason brawl,
where they were the first to be able to pick it up and hold on to it. That is such a weird psychological thing that goes on. I need to know how this happens. That is so wild, because that means the teams that accepted the strength and then bringing it back are not the ones willing to continue it, but the ones that are essentially accepting almost that humbleness of ego, lack of ego, because of their ranking, are the ones that keep through and continue it onward. This is what is going on.
whatever gets them the victories, you know?
I mean, whatever gets you
Garrosh ban!
and Falstad going to be taken away. Another global, and the double support is going to apply a lot of individual pressure. The Dahaka ban seems a bit interesting, though, considering the Illidan.
I'm wondering if they're limiting globals because they don't want to get pulled apart. Split pushing is a fairly effective way of dealing with double support, so they're just getting rid of at least the most used globals, right? And then they take Illidan too. That's another one, especially from Gale Force Esports. Illidan and Dahaka are, I believe, two of the most played heroes for Michael Udall, which forces him maybe more into an Arthas. Granted, Arthas versus Illidan, something that tends to go well for a team to have Arthas.
It's whether or not you want to pull away from the individual player or the overall play style of a team onto the map itself. And to be frank, again, with what the tale we've already told here of Gale Force Esports on this map, I think that makes more sense to target more into the False Dead. And also, you know, it has the nice benefit of maybe Mike Udall flexing a little bit more into, I'm not going to say uncomfortable, maybe less comfortable of heroes. Genji Arthas picked up. Strong rotations, really strong individual laners, a lot of hard crowd control. Everything here for Gale Force Esports is looking pretty well rounded. Just need themselves a backliner. And the Cho'Gall locked in.
I need that back.
So how do you recover? Tychus, Leo, you can't go into the Leo. You got to go for the Tychus. A new Barak's already a pretty solid deterrent. Is there any other individual
Gosh,
mount
they
there,
played
but
that
it's not that good?
so well. Gale Force had no clue. Or at least it seemed like they had no clue. You don't want to deal with that. You ban it. Cho'Gall Ariel?
It's strong. Intimidating, made up for lack of wave clear through Rhaegar.
No Medivh, like Blossom played with it.
Yeah, and it's not as good as other. It's not the ideal Cho'Gall composition. I think that's the best way to put it. It has, yes, a lot of good tools, but it's not perfect. Greymane is going to be the choice rather than going into the Tychus.
The global bans make even more sense now, but in the face of Gale Force, we just thought it was because Gale Force loves globals.
Yeah. And in fact, it's actually because they lack macro control with Cho'Gall and being a body down. And they make up for that by just saying, well, if those are off the table, we aren't too concerned about it. This does mean that they need to be absurdly dominant within their Cho'Gall plus whatever support individually they put with it. If they want to commit a 1-4, they can. I don't think they can get necessarily away with that with the Arthas Illidan being a lane mismatch. I think that they have to commit Cho'Gall plus one support, somebody baby the Illidan.
Should be Ariel.
Yeah, I mean,
Rhaegar
I assume, yes, but it's just going to be dominant laning, but then we have to consider how Gale Force plays the map, right? So even if, let's say, even in Death is dominant on one half of the map, Gale Force Esports most likely is going to ignore them, punish on the other half of the map, siege up, trade forts, and then it's down to the rotation game. In the end, rotation game goes over to Gale Force, not only in play, but when it comes to picks. So even in Death, assume they get a lead, but they can't let go, and it's going to be probably when they start pressuring a keep and forcing the hand of Gale Force.
Yeah, Gale Force have Genji and Anubarak as two good heroes to dive over walls to take beacons away when even in Death is sieging a lane and forcing them back. It's not just getting the beacon and applying pressure with the Zerg rush, it's being able to pull back a team that has been sieging because they freak out and say, we have to be able to go take this beacon because we can't give the Zerg.
Another weird thing that comes into this game specifically is I actually really like the idea of going into not the hunt on Illidan, which seems a little bit wild considering you banned out globals, now you have a global advantage onto one side of the table, but in a Cho'Gall into an Anubarak composition, and you already have the one anti-melee with the Curse Bullet threat onto Cho'Gall, Illidan needs to be in the downtime, much like you would consider Illidan into a Void Prison. You need a double threat, and so you need to make sure that he's not the only one being a problem on his own. Buying Metamorphosis to buy a little bit more time is going to allow the Cocoon to get revealed. Suddenly the Cho'Gall Illidan show is going to go on, and if it goes properly, it's going to be intimidating. But if you can't survive in that time, I think it's really going to hurt. And I actually hope to see Homicidal pick that up.
All right, well, let's get into game number one. Cho'Gall returns to Braxis holdout in North America with Even in Death taking on Gale Force Esports.
In the blue here is GFE. Mike Udall is going to be playing the Arthas. We have King Caffeine on a new Barak. Fan representing there on the Genji. K1 Pro on Greymane. And Akaface on the support as Uther. And
in the red, Even in Death, Battery will be playing Cho, Lutano playing Rhaegar, Hao on the Ariel. Up next, Frozen X playing Gale. And finally, Homicidal will be playing Illidan. One of his favorites.
There is a counter argument into going with the hunt to get that global advantage, though, and try and stop some of the rotations that Gale Force went into. This is not one of the cases where I feel like it's a lose if you failed to be able to do it, but it is one of those, when you look at the comp, I go, you know, I don't hate meta compared to most of the times that I see it. Mainly because of the interaction with the Anu, but the Arthas, because Illidan is going to struggle on his own with the Arthas slowing things down, his auto attacks, and you have a possible Divine Storm Uther. Just making sure Illidan can hold his own, I think, is going to be crucial here.
I was so scared about that gank attempt. The general idea, if you have the strong 4 or whatever man siege, is to go in the bottom lane, and because of that Octface and the rest of Gale Force Esports went up to the top lane, nearly caught one of the members of Even in Death who was there for the 2-3, but will be content to take out a tower and a gate before retreating.
I feel like this is a bit of, you know, kind of a misplay on the side of Even in Death. Typically, when you have a dominant laning phase, the natural thought process is to just transfer that over to the top or to the bottom lane. So naturally, Gale Force, if they don't want to go toe-to-toe with your Cho'Gall comp, they're going to prioritize top. And, you know, to essentially commit to a lane while assuming, or you should assume your opponent's going to commit the 4-man to top, they just forfeit over a free turret, and they cannot fall behind in these rotations. We talked about why the Globals banding were so cleverly done, is so that exactly what's happening doesn't happen in the later parts of the game. And not being in control in the first couple of minutes is not what you want when you have a Cho'Gall comp.
Yeah, Gale Force is doing a great job of just rotating away from Cho'Gall as soon as he shows up, and then knowing that it's going to take them time to clear out the wave and then rotate back up. Gale Force pushes in with the wave and then shows up. But this time, they're juking, they're outsmarting. They've got the foreman back in the bottom. They sent Cho'Gall up to the top, and then they could potentially siege back in.
Cho'Gall moving up. They reveal up on top, so everybody knows the laning situation, and this is where Gale Force immediately, on the other side of the map, they say thank you for the turret. You've committed too many resources to the top lane, and then, Even in Death, as always, seconds behind here are going to respond. And then Gale Force nopes right on out. This is going to keep happening. And this is the concern with Cho'Gall compositions. When it works right and there isn't something to worry about, you know, he can be an absolute bully, or the both of them, Cho and Gall. But right now, Gale Force seems to have the answer, and it's not like the level 10 power spike is going to be anything we look at to change the outcome of this game for Even in Death. So that is why this early game is very, very important for them.
They've at least found Michael
Nice.
Udall, but no one else is rotating up. So now with the rotations of Gale Force Esports slows hitting Homicidal, Kalen Pro right there to take him out as first blood in this game.
Gale Force Esports doing this so very well. I just want to give more credit to your Gale Force and how they're playing this out, because even though we do talk about, like, because the Cho'Gall's wild, you immediately go, well, this is a Cho'Gall problem, right? But it's actually Gale Force just being more clever so far into this game. Much like we saw in the last series with the Chromie transitions, the defending against the 3, we know what these goals are, and it's just being a step ahead of your opponent. Finally, though, we do see Even in Death. They're getting a bit of response here up on the bottom half of the map. We also have to consider that this comp, not nearly as good until it hits 7, mainly looking at Ariel, being able to throw out multiple heals with the CDR at that 7 talent here pretty much makes her go from good to great as a duo with Cho'Gall.
And as you can see, Fan doing what Gale Force Esports does best, which is having somebody backdoor the beacons behind. And Death surges forward, getting some damage on top of Fan with the Cho'Gall. But importantly, they're just trying to bring down this fort and catch up structurally to Gale Force Esports, who have skyrocketed ahead thanks to taking out the fort and their stellar rotations back and forth.
It's just a very grim picture when looking at the minimap. The fact that the only 4 down is in favor of Gale Force Esports, and it's not so close on the side of Even in Death either. They do a good job. They mitigate the, you know, Zerg rush so far for Gale Force, only accumulating 44%. 7 Talontier is going to come online. There's already macro pressure up on top with the night camp there. They're going to get another camp to be able to back it up. It's just, when does Even in Death... There's going to be a point in this game where they have to go, screw it, we're grouping, we're fighting. When you do it, is going to be very hard to figure out, and I don't think it's clear enough yet when it's going to happen. But when it happens, I really hope that Even in Death find a way to be successful with it. Otherwise, I assume this is going to be a very awkward, constantly cat and mousing around Gale Force Esports. And Gilly, it's Praxis holdout. No team can really do that against Gale Force.
No. If there was ever a question, the really clever way that Even in Death approached the draft and were able to get Cho'Gall and not give away too much for them, even still, the rotations of Gale Force are so fantastic. Their understanding of this battleground is on another level. They've beaten Team Expert on this battleground. It was the only battleground they were able to take out
One of the few for
Team
NA.
Expert.
Shout out to the Western Clash. You know, just got to remember the few games we ended up getting over Europe. Just
We got several over Team Liquid.
we got a few. You know,
3 between 2 teams.
between
and then
two
the one of Expert. I will take them where we can.
I mean, I'm with you. I'm in the same boat here. Gale Force has 86% and counting. So on the note of when does the fight happen?
Past the Zerg.
We've got one window, and it's pre-10. Do you do it pre-10? I don't think so. I would like to see Even in Death try and wait it out and wait for the heroics. But what that means is they're going to lose essentially probably a keep because of that. Are they okay with that problem? Or if not, because that Zerg Rush answer that you just gave, like to give that idea to push that fight, unlike every other major objective, because there's so many individual auto attackers and the auto attack range variance is much larger than that of a boss and not nearly as straightforward, that is one of the hardest objectives to move past and fight.
Yeah, you've got to go flank all the way around.
It's near impossible, to the point where I hope that we see this totally forfeited, an entire keep given up, and then Even in Death be like, now we're going to group, now we're going to fight.
Even in Death bring down that fort. Finally, they had put a lot of focus into with the Cho'Gario combination. The stun lock and throwing around of Cho'Gall. Eventually, he nudges his way back. The wall has been opened. Gale Force step forward toward the keep. Root down and slows as well on How as that Ariel. That'll bring her down. No support now for 20 seconds as the keep is brought down.
Very good job from Gale Force Esports, flat ignoring Even in Death there, and that Cho'Gall just diving right on by, getting the vulnerable target. The Ariel 10 is online. Heroics are going to be selected. Army of the Dead drop. Cocoon used onto the Cho'Gall. Homicidal makes it out with the cleanse, but I don't think Cho'Gall will. We'll see if the Surging Fist is enough. There goes Curse Bullet. Impale. No, it's going to be a Burrow Charge first. He does survive. This is a window, but keep in mind, Even in Death doesn't have 10s. They can't go out too far. They're very confident here for not having heroics.
They're continuing to follow. A lot of the heroic abilities were used. If you look at what's up, we've got Dragon Blade and Divine Shield. Dragon Blade winding up, thrown back from the Detainment Strike. Now Divine Shield letting Fan go in and slice and dice the members of Even in Death. It's been dealt with. And with the battery of Cho'Gall, How keeps everyone healthy, plus the double support.
Really clutch knock up there for King Caffeine if he was unable to do so and interrupt that Surging Fist. That would have been one dead bug. But that fight, I feel like if Gale Force had turned it, like, did you notice how much damage Anubarak was willing to take, even though they were still showing Even in Death wanted that fight? If they had taken it a little bit faster, granted, the distance to safety is closer for Even in Death, I think the odds of them winning that were almost 100%. But the transition from Fan seemed about 5 seconds too late, and then not willing to commit with the Divine Shield re-engage. I mean, don't get me wrong, they were manaless, and it would have been hard no matter what. But these are heroics, and you pretty much can't lose a fight unless you make a colossal misplay there. In the end, though, Even in Death got a breath of fresh air. They bought a little bit of time. But the biggest thing is that they have level 10. Do we see Twisting now their upheaval? I'm hoping that's the case, but I feel like it's only going to be upheaval, if any of those.
Every time you say upheaval, it's Hammer of Twilight.
I know, but I really think that upheaval
The Hunt.
IMO is the dream.
Hammer of Twilight.
Sad day every time. Why do I do this to myself, dude?
It's like the Artosis Curse, which you probably don't understand what
I
I'm
actually
talking
know
about.
that one.
Whoa! It's the Artosis Curse, except it's you and always with upheaval.
Yes.
Pretty sure without fail, 100% the other one.
And that's mainly because that's one of my weird, like, I accept the idea that I just have a different point of view on Cho'Gall. That I really just love upheaval and the displacement capabilities of it. Granted, don't get me wrong, I understand the downsides because it's not nearly as predictable as some other, especially now that Garrosh is in. It's pretty much a one-man upheaval that you can control. So, I mean, that's pretty neat. But at the end of the day, we end up keeping it real. We're going to go with the Hammer of Twilight, but it is Twisting Nether, which is a large amount of burst and something to consider because we have 5 melees on the side of Gale Force Esports. More like 4, counting 3 with 2 halves, putting together being Genji and Greymane. But you get the drift.
That I do. Level 11 versus 11. Even in Death, we'll be able to contest these beacons, but thankfully, they also have the Hunt for Illidan to keep track of that top lane and the catapults pushing there. They're continuing to keep this 2-2 with the Cho'Gall being 3 split with Rhaegar and Illidan together.
It's going to be very crucial for Even in Death to pick a fight on bottom. If they take it up on top, their distance to retreat into an Arthas composition is about non-existent, and their Illidan has nowhere where to actually play around and choose a fight. But if they take it on bottom, it's the inverse situation. Illidan has a lot to play, and suddenly the distance to safety is very big.
Oh, speaking of Illidan, Homicidal's been caught.
Friend or foe?
Frozen Waves slowing him down.
It's going to be fine. Cho'Gall doing his best to zone off Fan here. Turns out that's not necessarily the most fair 1 versus 1 here. Fan's going to have to back on out, but it's all about the rotations. I really hope Even in Death identifies the fact that their team fight goes from good to great if they end up selecting the fight on bottom here. If they are unable to do so, I assume Gale Force is literally going to bait a couple of ults, back tap, turn and reinitiate, and watch it white.
Well, Gale Force knows that somebody needs to come up and soak this lane, clear it out, but importantly get the soak because Even Death are falling behind almost another talent here. So they're keeping watch to see if anybody was going to rotate up and they could catch them in those rotations. Specifically Illidan, if he would be able to go up. And even Arthas is still hanging out watching so that he can flank off from the side. Somebody has to get to this minion wave eventually, but Homicidal playing it especially safe, being so good right now. Excellently played, knowing, and even he's going to drop the spray. We know where you're at.
I mean, you can hear it, dude. It's just like, you know, it's just waiting the build up. If he goes out too far, Sharks are going to find you. I've seen Jaws. Looks like Homicidal is going to make it out. He's playing it so very safe. The 3 catapults being built. He now reveals himself on top. We'll see if Gale Force tries to abuse that element. They have the 13 Talontiers, an entire full level lead and a huge window to be able to force the hand.
They're going to get split apart. Gale Force moving down, rotating in for the beacon. They've got 13.
Honestly, I'm surprised that wasn't an immediate cocoon to just try and force the fight. They're frozen. Tossing around, maybe wanted to move in. Surging Fist going to be thrown out. Calf's taking a bit of damage. Throws out the Impale. Arthas and Illidan are in the 1v1 on top. In the long run, Homicidal is not going to win it, which is why you see him immediately nope out. He has nothing to friend or foe to. He's dead. Oh, there we go. I didn't see the Rhaegar. A little bit slow on that one.
And that is why we see them running together. Live together, die together. Rhaegar and Illidan. Mercenary camp on the core. Illidan shows up again to deal with that. The catapults do 8%, 10% before that minion wave has been dealt with, and that's just from Gale Force rotating around, not picking a fight, just getting onto the beacon and forcing a lot of Even and Death down, and they're going to do it again.
There comes Howling Blast, thrown out by Mike Udall. Immediate Shadow Charge right on in there with the Swift Strike, the Dragon Blade, everything is going on. Lutano doesn't get the Ancestral Healing, which means we're going to have a dead... Wow, Cho'Gall actually living, even using the Twisted Nether. I thought for sure he was going to go out.
Hammer Twilight out too, and because they couldn't keep
Surging
Ariel
Fist.
alive with the Ancestral, it's there and ready for Cho'Gall to get back into the fight.
He's trying to make it happen here. Divine Shield is still available for Akaface. Fan getting a lot of damage on a Homicidal. Might need it for himself.
Lutano!
He gets the rebuttal and no Divine Shield going off for Aka.
Fan goes down, but even still, the beacon progress is climbing more and more for Gale Force Esports. There is a fort down in the bottom lane where those Zerg will push in for Gale Force. Gale Force gets the 100% beacon.
I think there's something to appreciate with looking at, you know, Even in Death and how they have gone about this later section of the game, because I've talked about it from very early on. There's going to be a moment where they have to accept which fight to take, and I talked about whether it's the 1 at 10 or whether or not it's going to be later. I really appreciate they chose the 13 talents here to be that individual fight, the least disadvantaged, and suddenly being remotely successful, they find themselves closing that gap in the experience. More importantly, they have another fight opportunity between this Zerg Rush and the 16 talents here. Most likely it's going to have to be over like a baited boss. But it is possible to be able to force the hand of Gale Force Esports and suddenly not be so responsive. Because, I mean, this has been 14 minutes of watching Gale Force do whatever they want, and Even in Death trying to go, are we in the right position for this?
That was a great slow by Lutano. It gives Homicidal time to run back up. Homicidal was running to Lutano, and Lutano was setting up for the same exact thing for a friend or foe. Oh, no, man, good. Whoo.
That's your boy Lutano. That's the real MVP right there,
yes.
Saving people even though he's not on the screen. Even in Death's going to pick up this camp. We have to keep in mind that window's closing. The 16 is here for GFE.
That's the same situation that Even in Death was at for the last beacon phase, where the time for them to be able to fight was before the beacons, and otherwise they have to let Gale Force go move around and see where they can poke and find maybe a kill. And they got that lucky Genji kill before. May not necessarily, they can't bank on being able to get that a second time in a row.
And the reason why I was suggesting a boss bait is because now that all the merge camps have been taken, other than a rotational colossal misplay on the side of Gale Force Esports, Even in Death doesn't have any case to actually force a fight. And Cho'Gall is one of the best at taking a bit of damage onto the boss and still being a hero that can turn and look to make a kind of a rebuttal. In the end, though, Even in Death decides to just respond with a bit of pressure up on top. Gale Force gets all the minion experience on bottom, and this is going to conclude the epic tale that is the race to 16. Sadly, not even close, baby.
It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. for Even and Death because they have to deal with 16. But so far, they have dealt with everything that Gale Force has thrown at them just barely. And they have that keep alive. Now, though, they know where the next Zerg Rush will be going once those beacons fire up.
Catapult pressure will build up here slowly but surely with Fan not pushing out this lane. He's going to go ahead and aid those now because he sees the map objective. Pretty smart to be able to commit to the lane now. Gale stomping his way on through.
I love the pitter-patter of Ogre boots on a beacon.
Feels like home. Really does.
16 within eyesight of Even and Death as these beacons start.
Gale Force is unable to force this pre-16 because of the passiveness that they displayed with their 16 time advantage. Now there's enough closed in by Even and Death to get the 16 talent here. This is one of those awkward moments where the narrative of just all about the race to 16, Gale Force isn't doing anything with it, so at the end of the day, it's probably not going to matter.
Gale Force are on the boss, though, keeping caffeine, baiting and keeping people up in the top. Maybe just now realize, but there's still no 16. The boss is picked up, giving time for Gale Force Esports to figure out what to do. Do we siege with this boss? Do we go for the beacons? They're going for the beacons behind this. This looks like a death push potential for Gale Force now.
The positive side here is the fact that the Zerg Rush is going to be up on top for Gale Force Esports, which is to no core. Fan goes in, starts the fight. It's going to be unstoppable here on top of the Gale. Surge Fisk right on out. Howling Blast connects onto Ariel. No follow-up there quite yet. Keep in mind, the Zerg Rush is only ticking upward. This is going to be 100% to 0. This fight beyond the boss is the best fight that Even and Death's going to get with the 16 talent here, and they're going to take it.
They're still trying to bring down that boss, but it's taking a while just relying on the poke. The Zerg Rush is starting in that top lane, and as you said, there is no keep left in that lane. That goes straight to core.
They have to move past this boss if they were going to be able to stall this out.
Cocoon, Gale Force Esports isn't going to even give them the option. The S-Time Ancestral Healing and Crystal Aegis are used to keep Hao alive until they can get through the Cocoon. Twisting Nether on top of Gale Force Esports.
And AoE support is there. Hao actually keeps the members alive. Now Homicidal dashing on in. He kills Fan, the first member to fall. There is no fort to run away from. Homicidal's going to have an absolute heyday here, getting the reset on reset, auto after auto. 3 members of Gale Force Esports are dead. Hammer of Twilight shifting Mike Udall right back. Akaface dropping the heal. And it looks like it's going to be enough because Even in Death now concerned about their core. Gilly, it does not matter. Gale Force playing the map proper, doing what they do best. And they take game 1 on Brax's holdout.
Gotta be frustrating for Even and Death to finally win that last fight so dominantly. But even though Gale Force were the ones to aggress in, knowing where exactly the boss was, where exactly the Zerg Rush was, and keeping all of the members of Even and Death in busy, occupied, just long enough for them to get the Zerg Rush onto the core. Even you could see Michael Udall running around baiting Gale, and finally Gale realized it and started to run back, but at that point it was just too late. Gale Force stellar understanding of Braxis holds true, remains true. They win game number 1.
And, you know, part of the reason talking about Upheaval versus Hammer of Twilight and some of the thought process going into it, one thing I do want to talk about is think about when you have a Gale on your team, you automatically have one character, but you lost a draft slot. I mean, that's essentially how it functions because it's not going to be making up. He isn't actually 2 full heroes. He's more like 1 3/4 to a certain extent. And so when you consider that, you're lacking a little bit in certain elements of damage at specific aspects of the game. You're vulnerable to percentile. So how do you make up for that? Oftentimes you go like, well, you can double warrior into it, but then you feel like you're going to lack too much damage. So then you feel like you need a traditional backliner or a perfect hybrid, which is usually the melee assassins, which we see Illidan in the last game. Who's actually going to start a fight? Like that oftentimes is the problem because you don't want a warrior because you don't have any damage in the long run, but you don't want an assassin because they can't start a fight proper. At that very bottom fight, think about a situation where they wanted it and they were trying to be able to make it happen, but Gale Force didn't actually have to take that. They volunteered to take it because they knew they were going to win the game anyways. Right. So it's just like that is that constant regroup, collect yourself. When are you going to take the fight? That kind of why I always am like, you know, I want people because oftentimes when you have the Gale, you just be like, don't take the fight he wants. And it's going to be okay, much like Malthael, for instance, is.
Well, that was game number 1. Even in Death did bring in one of the special strategies they had prepared for Gale Force. But just because they lost that one doesn't mean that they probably don't have more.